Board members, if we can get you to take your seats, and want to welcome everyone to, I guess we'd say, day 2 of our board meeting. Normally we have a study session at this time, but with the size of our agenda and everything we've got to get done this month, we're not going to have our study session, but we're just almost like a continuation of our board meeting. So there is actionable items that'll happen this morning. You guys have seen your agenda. For the public, welcome. Emergency exits are out the doors this way, and you can turn right or left, go north or south, and exit the building in case of emergency. Restrooms are just right out to the right. We're glad to have our security here with Highway Patrol. Welcome. Hopefully we're quiet and not a lot of activity today. Yesterday was a good day. Got quite a bit done. Great evening last night. Teacher of the Year. That was a lot of fun. Dr. Dixon is asked to be excused. She's at the teachers got a school pep rally, something to celebrate their teacher of the year there at that school. So I imagine she'll be joining us sometime later. So with that said, we're going to dive right into the first item on our agenda, which is our legislative session preparation. Turn time over to Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones, and if you would, introduce the staff that are with you, and then a little bit about our goals and objectives. I think we've been here, done this before, and we actually have a couple hours to get through our budget priorities, and then we're going to get into policy requests. So time's still really important, so time's yours.
Good morning. Deputy Superintendent of Operations Scott Jones. To my left is Chief of Staff Tiffany Stanley. To my right, our Finance Director Deborah Jacobson. To her right is Del Frost. I'll tell you a little bit more about their roles and their duties and responsibilities. And then you met Jacob as well yesterday. Jacob took Jamie Barrett's place, and so this is all the staff here. It's an interactive and iterative process that where we eventually arrive at what proposals you make by way of what's called the Budgetary Procedures Act. If you would, if all board members will, if you haven't already, if you'll, because we'll move through the agenda item using the Civic Clerk platform, which is relatively new. We start out first and foremost by why are we here, right, with the Budgetary Procedures Act. I won't go through the entire act itself, but it's available to you. Essentially what the act requires is a public education formulate a proposal, if you will, a budget proposal that's turned into the governor's office after your October meeting. We always begin meetings with the end state in mind. So today the end state is to first of all ensure that you've all had the opportunity to acknowledge and review to the fullest extent possible all the business cases that were put in front of you today or prior to today. What we typically like to come away with from the September meeting is an action on the part of the board to adopt what percentage of the WPU increase, and I'll develop that a little bit more with you, because at this point we don't necessarily know what revenue is available to fund public education. That typically gets solidified about the first or second week of the legislative session. So we always have started in the past with an action coming out of the September meeting that looks at what the WPU increases is or what you would propose. Again, I'll develop that a little bit further with you here in a few minutes. I'd like you to open up the document called the process. And I'll make sure, I'm pretty new to Civic Clerk too, so I'll try to make sure it opens up. Is it working? Come on now. Oh, there it goes. Okay. So what the process, okay. Hang on, having technical difficulties here. Let me try to get back on and display this. What's that code?
6868.
Okay, the process document provided to you in the backups basically provides a high-level overview of this process that you're involved in today. The first and foremost question we ask ourselves is the funding aligned to support the strategic plan, or does it fund the plan? So those, as we go through this iterative process of, first and foremost looking at the different categories of the proposals that have been put in front of you today, and with the business cases, and I'll talk a little bit more about the criteria as well, but essentially, we're looking at the opportunity to fund the plan, okay? This process really begins at the end of the last legislative session. What we do, which is a great job here, is the superintendent gets the staff together and we do what amounts to what's called an after-action report, right? We look at what the results of our funding requests were from coming out of the last legislative session, or back in March of 2019. Then, as you know, and Chief of Staff Stanley's come to you, and we've developed this strategic plan. Are we aligned? Are we moving forward together? Because it's all about moving together, not only at this level, but also within the LEAs, both districts and charter schools. And then we embark on the funding request formulation, which arrives at this September meeting, which is basically starts in July and August. The staff here are very, very proactive and interactive with the local education agency staff members across all of the programs that we do such a good job here, with the ultimate goal of ensuring that we maximize our efforts to get the resources to those that matter most, right? The educators and the students. Just to give you an idea about how successful this process has been, and a lot of it is due to just the awesome support that we've had from the legislature and all the legislators too that take part in this process, obviously when the legislative session starts. Since 2018, and all those, I'm pretty sure all of us were at the Teacher of the Year Award ceremony where the governor talked about how much money has been infused into public education over the last 4 years. Well, that's because this is where it all begins. This is where the process begins. But even before we come to you, I just can't, and I'll keep emphasizing this, the awesomeness of the staff interacting with the LEAs to arrive at what becomes the business cases that are required by the governor's office. There's a lot of due diligence. These business cases weren't created 2 days ago. This creation of these business cases started 3 months ago, right? Where we continually develop with the goal or the end state with coming to you with quality information so you can make decisions on what proposal you want to make that's required by the Budgetary Procedures Act. So once we get to, again, with this September meeting, lots of review here, lots of information. You're welcome to ask staff to come forward and provide more details behind the business cases. That's what the purpose of this meeting is. But then again, adopt or try to, make a motion on where you want to land as far as the percentage increase goes to the WPU. So then by the October meeting, you finalize your budget proposal that goes up to the governor the following week. Then in October, Deborah and her staff, they enter into a system called budget prep. We start that process, which, basically, without getting into too much detail, is an automated process where it's interactive with the governor's office and sets standards for when we get to January, which is the middle box there for the legislative session begins. So by that time, again, because of what you've done here today and what your staff have done so well with the LEAs prior to today, the legislature is pretty clear on what your priorities are as far as the budget goes for what you want to see as additional increases in fiscal year 21. And then January through March, there's lots of meetings that take place in the legislative session. Lots of meetings around performance measures. What if this is funded? What does it mean? We're anticipating, obviously, with this session, lots of discussion or meaningful movement together with tax reform. That's going to be one of the, obviously, the hot topics that's going on. It's going on right now, And a lot will have to do with what's decided there with what gets funded and how it gets funded. The how it gets funded is essential to, does it come out of the education fund? Will it come out of the general fund? And you see some of the business cases that make recommendations on where some of the funding should come from. You'll see that today, and you probably saw that when you were reviewing it early on, or the business cases early on when we sent them out to you. So this is the high-level review of the process that we're undergoing right now, and it's been very successful in the past 3 or 4 years. Again, I'll emphasize the interactive process with the staff that arrives at what's put in front of you today. The staff here in the office, and then also with the LEAs. So a lot of what you're seeing is proposals by the LEAs. And as we progress through the list, I'll make sure I let you know where they're coming from and, what the reasoning is behind that particular business case or item. I don't know why it keeps dropping me off here. So, I don't know. Anyway, okay, so the next item is, this is for your information only. So we started off with the Budgetary Procedures Act backup. I've gone over the process with you, a very successful process in the past 3-4 years. Next up is a public education acronyms list that the legislative fiscal analyst Ben Lishman provides, so that I catch myself sometimes saying using abbreviations. So if maybe you open this up and you keep it to the side and you hear me say something like I don't know, what's a good abbreviation? Anyway, some kind of acronym or something like that. Chances are it'll be covered in this list, okay? So this is just for, your use. If you like, we can print these out for you, as we approach into the legislative session, because a lot of times you'll be sitting in a meeting and you'll hear all this verbiage, but these acronyms or this list here is very useful. Try to bring it up. I don't know why it keeps kicking me out. So let's get started here. The next backup is, of course, what we call the tracker. It consolidates all of the business cases. This year, as we go through this particular list, let me make sure I got it up here. I'll start from the top here. Of course, we title it. These are your funding requests for state fiscal years 2020, meaning, we are in 2020 right now, so it could be a one-time request for funding in the current fiscal year during the session. And then it's for 2021 and beyond, depending on if it's ongoing or one-time funding. Then we take to the left here a priority column, and you'll note that there's no numbers in there right now. That's subject to your direction and your approval by way of the process this month, next month, where we try to find or solidify what the priorities are for your proposal that, again, goes to the governor's office, then eventually goes in front of the legislature. So that, and then even when we get into the legislative session, there's always the chairs of the public education appropriations come to us and say, hey, board or, staff of the board, we need the priorities of the board. Because like I alluded to earlier, the revenue is basically solidified or given to us that's available to fund public education roughly around the second week of the legislative session. Prior board members had adopted a categorical approach to how we basically develop to get us to where we are right now. So there's 4 categories. Category A is WPU value and growth. Category B is funds that would flow through to the LEAs or outside entity requests. One example of an outside entity request is the University of Utah Reading Clinic business case as an example. They seek, board support for those for the funding requests there. Then if you scroll down, category C is the inter-office budget. Essentially what business cases or requests that staff are making to continually and in a positive fashion, which we've done so well over the last 3 and 4 years or even before that, is support the staff, respective staff in the LEAs, and ultimately the educators and individual students at our level These are the types of resources that we're requesting or asking for to stay basically within the office here in order to provide the support, meaningful support to our LEAs that matters most to the individual student. Then, of course, you have Category D, which are the Utah Schools for the Deaf and the Blind requests. Now, Superintendent Coleman is going to focus mainly or mostly on these during his particular time or the meeting today that you have with the USDB. So we won't spend much or if any time on this because we anticipate that he'll cover down on those cases that they have prepared in front of you. One key takeaway from Category D is you'll note, please, that there's the weighted average salary adjustment. We don't have a business case or a link to that yet. Basically, that's a law. There is a law that requires that we adjust the salaries of the USDB educators. So we'll finalize that between now and the October meeting, and those calculations go forward anyway because it's by law, right? That's a code-driven amount, if you will, that we adjust the educator salaries for the USDB. So now if we go back up to the top, here's what we've added additionally to the tracker, if you will, or this great tool that we use to orient everyone to the process and then also carry it through all the way through the legislative session and the success that we'll have coming out of the session because we have such a great partnership with the legislature. These categories are strategic, well, actually, so let me keep working from left to right. So there's the priority column, there's the program itself, again, broken up by category. Then we give you the amount of the new money or the additional funding amount requested. So when we say new money, or basically new program, right? It's not a current program that's going on, and I'll articulate that or base that on, as we get into the one eaches here of each one of the requests, or additional funding to a program that's been ongoing for a while, and there's several examples of that. Then the type of request we say or recommend whether that funding request should be ongoing or one time. All right, ongoing meaning that, starting in 2021, X amount of dollars are appropriated in an ongoing fashion so that appropriation continues in what we call the out years, 2022, 2023. Or one time where we say, the one-time funding is necessary one time in 2021 to meet this purpose or this particular request. Now, not all of the business cases have in the next column a summary, but trying to provide as much information to you in a summarized fashion without you having to go through all business cases and the 10 questions in those business cases is the intent of the summary of each business case. And then, which is going to be a very useful tool for the decision-making process that you're embarking on today, and then again finalizing in your October meeting, is 3 categories titled Strategic Plan Advancement, Essential Program Maintenance, and Expansion and/or a new program, which, we can get into that too. So what I'd like to do is offer some time for Chief of Staff Stanley to let you know why we put these or added these this year, because this is a new piece or part of the process. Because again, I think it really does support 2 things. It demonstrates that we're very focused on ensuring that we're getting the input and working so closely with the LEAs, across both districts and charter schools to basically what amounts to funding the plan, but then we're also providing some level of ability for you to, from a criteria basis, if you will, make decisions on what, if any, business cases go forward. So, Tiffany.
Okay, Tiffany.
Thanks. So yes, Tiffany Stanley, Chief of Staff. So just to add a little bit more to what Deputy Superintendent Jones was laying out, we've categorized these business requests to put an emphasis and make clear which business cases speak to advancing your strategic plan, But then there are requests that fall outside of that. So things along the lines of essential program maintenance. A good example of this is the teacher salary supplement program, where there was an underestimate, and so to fully fund that program, we would need to increase an appropriation. And then separately, there are requests around an expansion or a new program that fall outside of the scope of advancing the strategic plan. And those under the advancing the strategic plan, we were really specific about that, where it might be easy to attach, a business case related to, again, I'll use the teacher salary supplement program, that provides a supplement for educators in, STEM fields and other fields. You could attach that to the effective educators and leaders goal. However, that isn't one of the specific strategies within your strategic plan. So we didn't attach that to that goal. We've been explicit about it's just those activities, those strategies that are really specifically outlined in your strategic plan that we've attached that X under the strategic plan advancement column. So.
Okay. So focusing on the example that she gave, so where is the X's for the teacher salary supplement program? Which column is it in? I know, but which category?
Essential.
Right. So see, to Tiffany's point, right, while TSSP may not necessarily fit into, the support, if you will, of the strategic plan, it is a necessary, we supplement, educator salaries, basically. So that's why we have these three categories, because we also want to make sure that, there are some essential program maintenance, if you will, that needs to occur, based on law or code, which is true to the teacher supplemental program, that, it's required, right? That was something that we have to fund, or a request for funding, so that we can move forward and make sure that they get the supplements that are calculated based on eligibility. So I'd like to pause right now and just ask through the chair if there's any questions with how the tracker is created, and/or, what you're seeing on the tracker right now. Is it, visible, usable, makes sense to you, especially focusing on the addition of the three categories, if you will: strategic plan advancement, new funding or program, or, sustainment of the program. Any questions, Chair?
Yes, we
point?
have a few
Okay.
questions from board members. Board Member Belknap.
Thank you, Chair. Is there anywhere here that we have the ability to see how much money is in the program now and where it comes from? I think that would be very helpful.
Okay.
And two, on the TSSP money, with this, because we brought that
Yeah,
up,
that's good.
and it doesn't fit the strategic plan. That's really not my question, but I thought that was interesting. We have the formula, we've created the formula because of statute, that they added some other teachers who can receive that funding. And so my question is, I mean, just so you know, I'm actually all about TSSP. I think it's awesome. However, why is that becoming our priority because they didn't fund it correctly, or they changed the rules along the way? I think we need to, and I'm not just talking about that program, I mean anywhere that the legislature has changed the rules and then they didn't fund it.
Okay.
So anyway, it's really just more of a comment. You don't
Okay,
really.
you got several questions. Are you keeping track of her?
Yeah, I got it. So,
Okay.
sir, if I may, Chair. So the first question is, can we demonstrate or show how much funding is right now currently for each program?
Presently
Yeah,
funded, yeah.
currently funded. Yes, we can put it on the sheet. However, the staff did also do a good job in the business case itself of demonstrating how much ongoing funding is, or one time, is currently funding the program. But we can add a column on this to say, to meet that intent. I'll do that coming out of this meeting and prior to the October meeting. To the question about the TSSP as an example, that process involves us providing an estimate, to your point, to Board Member Belknap's point about, additional educators were added on. We estimated the best we could on what that would mean, and we just missed the target, right? So now we're taking the process, both in this process, but outside of it as well, which is fine, to, identify how much we were short, and then have that trued up, if you will, as part of this process or the legislative session. Going forward, I would anticipate that we would be more accurate and it'd be more pinpoint. It was a big change, and staff did a good job. I mean, we came fairly close. We missed it. And yes, we had to adjust because it says in the law, shall, prorate the amount. So we did we followed the law, but that will the intent is to, by way of this process, is to make it up to the educators sometime in the spring or along that line, okay? Yeah. Does that answer all Board Member Belknap's questions?
Just for this minute.
Yeah, for this minute, okay, sure.
Okay, we only have so many minutes.
Right.
Okay, Board Member Lear.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question about, I'm looking through these, and I'm wondering if there's an attempt to consolidate or coordinate with similar kinds of requests.
Yes.
It's hard to weigh OEK against early childhood against early learning. And I don't know if it's just you ask specialists to give you their requests and then you give them to the board, or if it would just be helpful for me to do a couple of things, to say, to try to consolidate them under one main heading and then subheadings, and or tell the board which ones seem more compelling to you or have been asking, or there, and that's not the only example there. I even think that school safety and school nurses could be combined, or it just seems like so much and they seem so disparate.
Okay,
So, I mean, does that
Yeah.
give you helpful feedback?
it
or-
does, yeah.
And maybe it's impossible.
Right. No, anything is possible, everything is not, right? So we can do that. We do take the approach, though, of trying to break everything out for the purpose of this meeting. So that as we progress towards the October meeting, based on your direction as a board and your guidance, we can consolidate that. This is a perfect opportunity for me to also demonstrate to you that by way of the Finance Committee tomorrow, we know what our carry-forward balances are. So between now and the October meeting, we'll be looking at ways, because the legislature looks at this and likes this approach as well, is to take those carry-forward balances and possibly offset, if you will, some of these requests. So that when we arrive to your final decision-making point in October, we can, show you or demonstrate to you that there's alternative means of funding these or consolidating them, if you will, with that. And then with October, given this input that we received, which is very valuable, between now and the October meeting, we can look at combinations of the business cases
Can I-
or the proposals.
You have a follow-up?
I just have a follow-up, quick
Sure.
follow-up. It would also kind of in the spirit of trying to tell you what would help me,
Okay.
it would help me to say, to distinguish, OEK is different from early childhood, they can't be combined, or because of this, or
Okay.
it's different from early learning because of that, or why they should be separate as opposed to, oh, wait, yeah, maybe they could be combined. So
Okay.
that's one point. And then the other thing that would be helpful to me in reading these business cases is I didn't get the feeling that there's been an exhaustion, I keep thinking of exhaustion of remedies, and that's not it, but an exhaustion of the, it would be helpful in the business case to say, we've tried this, we've tried that, we've tried this, we've tried that, and we're still asking you for money. Sort of
Right.
what the legislature wants us to do
Sure.
to them. And I feel like, and I could give you a couple of examples, but I'd like to hear, well, we've tried outsourcing, we've tried part-time, we've tried one-time, we've tried using the director or the coordinator in a different role so that that contributes to the solution, and we're still thinking that this is necessary.
Okay.
Thanks.
Chair, so part of the process today in this meeting that we'll start to do here in a few minutes is to start to go through each one of the individual business cases. So this is an opportunity to meet Board Member Lear's, what I'm understanding is her question about, perhaps Director Thronston comes forward and says, we've tried this, or this is why we have OEK and early learning as separate business cases, right? That's today. This is why we dedicate and cut out so much time. Then, based on the input or feedback you get to those types of questions or concerns, and direction you give us, we, again, move forward or towards the October meeting to either consolidate, look for other alternatives for funding, or, to demonstrate along the lines of what you just mentioned. Have you tried to outsource this before? Have you tried to, contract for it? Was it one-time funding before and now you're requesting ongoing? Those types of things will come, I believe, clearer throughout the day-to-day, and then all be clear for your decision-making in October.
And before we move on, maybe it'd be good for our situational awareness that maybe Tiffany can remind the board that there's a funding study going on with all of these lines that we have for funding are sacred cows to somebody. There was an evolution that took place, and people have their fingerprints on it, and we are where we are today because of what we chose and the legislature has chose to do in the past. And so all of the part that Carol was talking about, consolidating and simplifying, and that's part of a study. But Tiffany, can you just brief the board just for their situational awareness that that's taken place and there's a expectation out there that when this is done?
Yes, so we've contracted with a researcher to conduct a comprehensive study of Utah's education funding system, and we're underway. There will be a first phase of that report provided to you at your November board meeting, and then to the legislature, and then a second phase next November. But essentially, as you may recall, the objective is that essentially our funding system was established in the 1970s and then studied again in the 1990s. A lot has changed since then, and we've layered on a lot of complexity to the funding system. And so there's a real need to take a comprehensive look at the main focus is going to be on equity of the system. And we'll take it line by line and provide a comprehensive report at the end of the day. So, yeah.
So, and I always throw in that there's that equity piece, but then there's also the simplicity and efficiency of all of the formulas and how and what we're doing. So that is coming up sometime in the future, and there's a expectation there's legislators involved in this also, that those betterments that board member Lear's kind of looking at, what do we consolidate, how does that look, who are the winners and losers, all of that kind of stuff is still ahead of us. So seat 25, there's somebody, I'm going to turn it on, it's not identifying you. So did somebody want to speak? Okay, that would be you, board member Davis.
I have two questions, if it's appropriate to ask both, or I can ask one and ask another later.
Yes.
But first, to your question, I really like the tracking sheet. I think it's really user-friendly. I like that we can link straight to the business cases and the wealth of information that is there. My first question is, and I appreciate that we're working closely with our LEAs, I think we, as a state board, that's what we do. We support our local schools, our local districts and charters. How closely does what we've created here match what USBA has created as a representative of the local boards? And has that been juxtaposed? And if not, can it be to just take a look at that?
I'm guessing, or I'm hoping that Superintendent Shoemaker is sitting behind me. Okay, because I think he would shake his head north and south that we were very inclusive of the USBA in the sense of that too.
He's shaking his head north and south, yes.
Oh, yes, okay. All right, sir, I'm taking you to lunch today. So, but basically, what they've proposed, and this is a perfect segue, in Category A, we look to them, we look to representatives of the field to make a recommendation on how much to fund the WPU. or the increase, or the percentage increase of the WPU and growth. The WPU and growth are always essential components, if you will, of budgets that obviously support the strategic plan, but also support the LEAs. Then, as we progress through each business case, you'll see other business cases that were brought up to the field with NES, transportation, and then school safety as well. I may be missing one, but we'll get to them as we go through it. So, I gave a long answer to your question, but yes, I really feel strongly that once again, as we kicked off the meeting with, is that we are very proactive with ensuring that we're providing the best means to get input up from the local education agencies.
Okay, your follow-up?
It's a second
Additional
question.
question.
Yes. With the funding study that we are doing, is that going to dovetail, and how so, with the study that the legislature is commissioning now on education in general? And are we going to, and is that going to include a funding study? And are we going to pay for 2 funding studies? I mean, how are we working with them or dovetailing, or has that conversation even happened?
So my understanding of that audit is it's more around outcomes and not as much around the inputs and the state appropriation mechanisms. So that, in a nutshell, I think they're focused on different objectives. So.
Interesting. Thanks.
Mhm.
Board Member Belknap.
I just want to make a point of clarification that our funding study doesn't just include us. It includes the HEAL, it includes the governor's office, it includes the auditors, and the treasurer. It's a large group. It's not just us.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, please continue.
Okay, so with that, let's get to it. Let's start with Category A. With the percentage increase to the value of the WPU. Again, this is a recommended amount to the board. It's a 6% increase. There are implications with each percentage increase to the value of the WPU that we're prepared to answer questions on. And then there's the enrollment growth piece of it, which we're estimating that a 1% increase in the WPU is approximately $35 million. You might hear $34 million, but for planning purposes at this point, again, there's a process called the Common Data Committee that starts off or that kicks off later this month and, maybe into October, where, essentially that process is one that helps us get to or arrive at a figure for what enrollment growth means, right? So this is just an estimate right now, and we're just saying that about 1% equals $35 million. Okay, and so there was 2 business cases that were prepared by Superintendent Shoemaker and or other members of the USBA or business administrators that relate strictly to WPU enrollment growth, which again demonstrates our resolve to ensure that we're getting recommendations or feedback from the field. Okay, so any questions or concerns with the WPU increase and or enrollment growth? As for all part of Category A.
Okay. Board Member Bolter.
So I know that there had been, with Representative Last's bill a couple years ago, that for every increase, 1% increase of the WPU, our property tax would also increase. And then I think this last legislative session, was it capped at 4%, so we can increase up to 4%, and then anything above that raises property taxes. Did that pass, or did that fail, or what happened with that?
My understanding is, yes, there's a cap. I can't remember, though, if it was 4%.
I can't remember if it was 3 or 4%. There was like discussion.
There's
No cap.
no.
So that did not pass.
No,
So
it
for
didn't
every
pass, right.
percent,
Okay.
okay, so when
Yeah.
we do this, then we will be raising
There-
property taxes.
There is still that's my understanding, is that
Okay.
there's a formula that for each 1% incurs a particular
property,
amount, a
right.
bump in the property
We-
tax, yes. But
we-
no cap.
Okay,
That's
that's
right, no cap.
huge.
But we need to be really clear, we don't raise.
No, we don't.
They.
Well, we're inadvertently raising it,
Yeah,
though, by
well,
raising
if-
the WPU.
If they
It's
go with
all
our
linked.
recommendation, then
Right.
they do it, so.
Right.
Okay.
Board Member Belknap?
Sorry, Chair. So I appreciate Michelle's comment, because I think we need to always be aware of that. Because we always think, oh, we're going to get this great increase, but it also is going to cost our teachers and our schools that increase on each individual. But Scott, I actually have a question about the 6%. And I know the CDC will do the growth model together.
Right.
And so that's kind of like, we don't really decide that because they decide that. But the WPU, for every time we increase this, we are going to have to take something else away. There's only this much money in the pot. And if we go for 6%, you can't really have 20 line items below that and fund it all. Would
Well-
that be a correct statement?
Well, let me
We
make
don't have
sure.
our money yet.
Right,
it's
so
very
we don't know what the revenue amount is, yeah, for sure, right? And we don't
Right.
find that out until like roughly about, again, the second week in the legislative
Right.
session. So conceivably, if there was 300 million, and I'm saying that's what it's gonna be, I don't know yet, right? But just as an example, if $300 million is made available to fund public education, then yes, and if we're estimating that a 1% increase is 35 million, then you take 35 times 6, right? Which gets about 210 million. So then you'd have 210 million from 300 million to give you the opportunity to fund other. That's typically what we, just kind of in a nutshell, what we run into during the legislative session. So if there's specific questions, though, too, related to why the field recommends a 6%, I think it'd be value added if you offered Superintendent Shoemaker to come up, to talk about why they're thinking 6% on that too. I think that's a key piece to today's meeting as well, because there's a lot to do with the WPU. So increase or percentage increase to the WPU.
I'm not seeing any board members that are saying
Okay.
why.
Yep.
I think
Okay.
we've been here, done that before.
Right,
of
right. Yep.
2.5% just keeps the doors open.
Mm-hmm.
Extra for programs and compensation, salaries, et cetera. So
Right. Okay.
please continue.
Okay. Well, subject to no further questions with Category A, let's get into Category B. Now, remember, Category B is, basically what we feel would be funding that would, or what we know would be funding that would basically flow through, if you will, or get down into the LEA and then ultimately into the schools. There are some administrative costs associated with them as well. But basically to the earlier point about the 3 columns, strategic plan advancement, essential program maintenance, and expansion of and/or a new program, you'll notice like first off at the top is the optional enhanced kindergarten OEK business case or proposal, if you will, for your review and determination or decision-making process, where all this particular program meets the criteria of all having X's in all 3 categories. Supports the strategic plan, it's essential for program maintenance, and then it can be, construed as an expansion and/or a new program. So any questions on the optional enhanced kindergarten OEK business case? Okay,
Board Member Earl?
Yeah, so my question is this, and it says it there, but I'm just trying to make sure.
Okay.
This is new funding for this. This is additional funding for beyond what
Okay.
we are already paying. What are we already paying for this?
right. So I think this is the piece where we need staff to come forward, because there's some nuances with this particular one with, prior funding. Or why don't you kick off with that too, so make sure you introduce yourself.
There's a chair on the end there.
So
Okay,
we'll start with
sorry.
Del Frost's explanation. Introduce yourself and what your role is here for the board, please.
Good morning, Dale Frost, Fiscal Policy Analyst for the Board. There are 2 pieces of this. There's $2.88 million of funding, federal funding that's going away. That's the essential program maintenance. And then above and beyond that is the difference is about $16 million. So to answer your question right now, there's $7.5 million in the program. And so total funding for this, if this was fully funded, would be about 26 $8.2 million.
So we currently fund it at 7 million.
We currently fund
So
it
we're
7
tripling
million, But there's 3 million of the current program that's going away.
Right.
Now, to the program itself, Director Thronson can address any questions, or go ahead, Jennifer, if you want to, provide additional detail that might help in the decision-making process.
Yeah, so really at the 7.5 and the 2.8 million, we're at about 10.5 million, so we're looking for 26. We currently fund about 20% of students in OEK. It's around 24% with the current federal funds. We currently have about 40% of students or more that would be benefited by having the opportunity to attend full-day kindergarten. The national average of students attending full-day kindergarten is 80%. So currently Utah is at 20%. So just to kind of give you a space of why we're requesting more, our data is indicating students who have the opportunity to participate in full-day kindergarten who are showing need outperform their peers who didn't have that opportunity.
Can you define, sorry,
Okay,
Chair.
go ahead.
Can I ask a question? Can you define showing need?
Yes.
What does that mean?
Absolutely. So the primary mechanism is the kindergarten entry profile assessment that we give at the beginning of the school year. They might also take into consideration if they have other data points that they have for students, if they're on an IEP, different indicators that indicate risk. English language learner might have priority. LEAs have flexibility on how they determine who has access to full-day kindergarten, but it is through legislation based on academic need of kind of predicting who's not going to be successful in third grade. So there you can use different metrics to help them make that determination.
Okay, so, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
May I ask another question? So what percent of our body, our youth or whatever, kindergartners are needing that kindergarten age,
So
fall in that category?
Yeah, currently we have about 40% of students not coming in ready for kindergarten according to the KEEP. And so we're trying to meet the percentage of students not coming in ready with these dollars. So currently we are underfunding, at least on the percent of students coming in. The last 2 years have had about 40% of students coming in not ready for kindergarten. So this would get us to being able to cover all the students coming in not ready for kindergarten was kind of the goal with the increase.
Okay. Okay.
These are all really, really good questions. There's also opportunity too, as we're going through this, to ask them, not in board meetings also, not saying don't, but there's a lot to what we do here on these funding requests. Board Member Cindy Davis.
Well, this may be one such question, but I think that the TANF funds require certain assessments to be used, am I understanding correctly? And if that money is not refunded again, I've had some feedback that it's just a lot. And I know we asked for a waiver for some of the PEEP assessment, but would we be able to streamline some of the assessment that we do that's required by TANF funds if we're funding this on our own?
So there's nothing required by
And still get the
TANF.
data we need?
So TANF does not require the assessment. The legislation we have for kindergarten supplemental, the additional dollars does require the assessment.
state?
Yes. So it's not dependent on the federal fundings. as
So
to
no
why we have the
flexibility
assessment. It would take state
Forever.
changes in the OEK legislation. Well, the kindergarten supplemental, which would be blended into OEK.
Board Member Lear.
Very short question. So if this money were added, this 18 million, what then percentage of students would be in all-day kindergarten in Utah?
We would anticipate being able to serve that 40% that is demonstrating academic need if the additional 18 million were provided.
So 40%, so still half of the national average.
Yep. It would take about 70 million to get at the percentage of getting all kids into all-day kindergarten. We are starting with the priority need at this point.
Thank you.
Board Member Earl.
So along the lines of meeting the national average, by the time we're in third grade, I mean, I guess we're talking young children once again and putting them full day in a class. And I know that's a parent choice kind of a thing. At the same time, I mean, I think in some ways we have to ask what is appropriate for young children. And I know we're in this race to get them to college and get them prepared for it, but at the same time, they're not adults. And so I just hope that we're balancing that with the appropriateness of the age. I'm still concerned with the assessments that we're measuring numeracy and literacy at that age when they are just being exposed to literacy and numeracy. And there is developmentally, there is change that takes place. Some children, and you know this, some children are ready for that at 3 and 4. Some children are ready for that at 8. I've had children on both spectrums. And so just the appropriateness, just because we're not at 80%, does not necessarily mean we are not doing what's appropriate for families and children. And a race to get as many children into a full day program isn't appropriate for all children. So I hope we will balance that out and make sure we're doing what is right for kids, both academically, emotionally, that we're looking at more than the numeracy and literacy. Anyways, that's my comments.
Jennifer, maybe you could add to this. My understanding of all-day kindergarten, the kindergarten whole push, and this goes back many years ago. If you want to listen to parents, and that they're saying, "Let me in, let me in, let me get my kid in," and the problem is funding. Is that?
Yeah, so we
and
definitely
so it's
have.
not like we're forcing parents to push their kids into school.
Yeah, there's
they're
greater
saying-
demand for full day or extended day. So some of our programs just run 45 additional minutes. It's not necessarily a full day option. And optional enhanced kindergarten allows for them to decide the additional minutes they would like. Some LEAs choose full day, some choose 45 minutes, some choose 75 more minutes. So it's totally dependent upon the LEA and what that looks like. But the demand for a fuller learning experience is higher than the current supply, as well as we have students who failed the test purposefully so that they can attend a more full experience, because their family knows if you perform poorly, you'll be accepted into these fuller experiences. So we would love to be able to serve students who really need it, as well as think about solutions such as Canyons, where they're allowing people to pay to go to full day kindergarten, which is another reason we're not coming for a $70 million ask, is there are other solutions than just state-funded kindergarten. And so opportunities for families to invest in their child in a way that is not requiring the state legislature to also invest.
Thanks. Board Member Mark Marsh.
I think to the point, we have to remember the word is optional. It's optional whether they go in or not. The parent has the choice to do that. But I can tell you from personal experience and having worked in an LEA that there are those students who have had it, and purposely that's part of why they're there, is to be introduced and to be brought into numeracy and everything else. But at the same time in our LEA, when they got to the point where they were at proficiency and back up to speed, they were slid back out into the classroom in order to make room for the next most appropriate student to be there. And so I think we have to kind of also remember that we should have a trust in our LEAs that they'll do the best for students.
Not seeing any other comments, so please continue, Scott.
Chair, if I may, perhaps this is an opportunity where Jennifer could maybe expand on Board Member Lear's question about, why separate business cases. I mean, I'm sure you were here for that question. Is that, could we take
You
a
bet.
few minutes for that, sir?
Hey, this is
Yeah.
yours to push forward. We have this meeting and one more to get all this ready, so.
Yeah. All right. So the question, as far as I understood it, was why early learning as a separate business case from OEK. Is that correct?
Even, oh, man.
I would love
Turn
it.
your
I
mic
want to make
on.
sure I answer the right question.
Or even why those, all three are not, and those are the three I caught. Maybe there's another early learning. Why are they not all separate, or at least coordinated, or are they?
So the current kind of distribution of how we did it was you've got the goal of early learning, but in the goal you have 4 strategies, and we have 3 different business cases to address 3 of the 4 strategies. One doesn't require a business case at this time. So you have the piece around high quality instruction, and that is the early learning piece, which broadens our current early literacy legislation to also address early learning as a more holistic nature, to include things like numeracy that aren't currently included in legislative funding, supports, or professional learning. Then you have the OEK piece, which is to address strategy 2 around more opportunities for students to have access to full day or extended day kindergarten. And then the third business case is our early childhood grants, which is related, but it's preschool. And the reason I think we have them all separated out is currently all the legislation is separated out. So it just makes more sense for us to be able to attach the business case to the legislation that it will eventually go to, although they are one unified effort to improve early learning. So I can totally understand like the bigger picture. As an agency, we see them as interrelated strategies. So for example, giving kids more time has shown to be useful, but making sure the quality of instruction is high in those classrooms goes together. And so as we look at early learning as the initiative to improve the quality of instruction, we are using the OEK funds to improve the amount of time provided for the quality of instruction. So although they are separate business cases, they interrelate to the quality. The early learning bill also provides professional learning for preschool through third grade teachers, although it's not going in the early childhood grants portion due to the way the legislation's written. They're all integrated approaches to improving early learning. And so they might seem isolated in their approaches. And if we only get one over the other, it's not dependent on the other one passing. So we can still have more time. We may not be able to attend to quality of instruction, which would be of value as well. The preschool piece, given if we don't receive those additional funds, we have to serve less students than we currently do. And so looking for opportunities to maintain programs in that space. But the early learning is kind of the umbrella piece of the quality of the instruction that our students receive. And the other two pieces are the opportunity for access to receive the quality of instruction. So that might be the way I would kind of dovetail them all together.
Board Member Lear.
I'm sorry, I just really want to understand this, the format as well as the topic, but it would just be easier for me, though you view them as integrated, it just would be easier for me to view them together and then have you say to me, well, it doesn't really help to get early childhood, it helps more to get X than it helps to get Z, and getting this little piece of it, though it may have a quirky appeal, getting this piece is really the most basic, most fundamental. That would just help me more, but again, just giving you feedback.
May I respond?
Yeah.
And I'm happy to give you my biased opinion with a preference towards quality of instruction. If the quality of instruction is not there, giving more time will be insufficient for improving the outcomes of students. So from a priority, if we can improve the quality of the instruction students are receiving, we will have more students coming or being prepared for school in pre-K, entering kindergarten, and so on through the years. So from a priority standpoint, from looking at what we have available to you, the early learning piece would be of most value because it'll serve pre-K through 3 and hit all of these pieces. There will be some pitfalls of not fully funding OEK because we'll be losing programs given the TANF funding going away. We are not currently able to sustain what we have in our preschool programs if the preschool one doesn't get funded. So it is a complicated conundrum, but in terms of long-term impact, improving the quality of instruction in early years will have the greatest impact on future years as well. So that's, if I were choosing, it would be the early learning initiative. And there is my bias straight on the table.
Helpful, thank you.
Okay.
Please
Next up
continue.
is the early childhood grants for review, and also any questions for decision-making purposes you might have on that one. Chair, any questions or concerns with that business case?
Not seeing any, but that doesn't mean we won't have them next time.
No, that's fine. Utah Leadership Initiative, early learning, pre-K 3. Now that one, both the Leadership Initiative and early learning has requests for both ongoing and one-time funding. Next up is Enhancement for Accredited
Okay.
Students Program.
We've got a question
Okay.
from, or comment from Board Member Linda Hansen.
We've been working on the Utah School Leadership Initiative for a couple of years now, but I doubt that the new board members know exactly what that is. And so I wonder if we could have Darren come up and kind of talk about that a little bit, because that's a considerable amount of funding. And if is he around?
Sarah?
What's that?
Oh, Sarah's going to do, the lovely Sarah Young is
Yeah.
going to.
Thank you. So Sarah Young, implementation coach. I've been working with Assistant Superintendent Darren Nielsen, as well as other staff here at the agency to develop this business case. The business case itself is based on enacting the 14 recommendations from the school leadership working group that were approved by the board in December of 2017. So of those 14 recommendations, 3 of them require resources, and those are the 3 that we've presented in this business case. The first is a one-time funding request specific to acquiring a performance assessment for school leaders in regards to improving opportunities for our leaders to demonstrate their learning as part of their certification process. The second component is for the school leadership grant. That was also in the recommendations. This would be a grant program where the money would flow to the LEAs to be able to develop training opportunities for their leaders, especially in those first couple years, and creating resources around opportunities for collaboration, professional learning, and internship. The last component is specific to a scholarship leadership component. So we have been working with our data folks here and looking at which of our communities have a gap between individuals who have their administrative certification and the amount of positions that they have available. We've specifically identified charter schools and rural schools, as well as a gap in regards to representation from underrepresented populations. So the ideal of the scholarship/internship would provide targeted opportunities related to improving the access for those communities to certified administrative individuals.
Do you have a follow-up or anything?
I was on the work group and we worked very hard. And one of the things that I've heard since I've been on the board is that we need better principals. And the principals want the opportunity to collaborate more. And so all of these things are part of those suggestions that we brought forward. So very important. Will really move the needle on leadership and administration. Thanks.
All right, Scott, please continue.
Next up, let's see, I think we were left off on enhancement, right, for accredited student programs. Yep. Then next up is concurrent enrollment program. And, I just want to pause and just make sure board members are oriented to the 3 columns, right? The X's in the columns, supports the strategic plan. We tried to list them in order, and so that, if you were to look at this sheet, then, it corresponded with, in Civic Clerk, each business case is aligned in order with the tracker as well, okay? So, and then, some of you have the capability to click on the actual link, and it takes you right to the business case. Concurrent enrollment program, the supporting students learning English in TSI schools. Student safety is one that came, again, I believe I articulated this earlier as well, that it was one that was brought up to us from the field. The benchmark assessments, the Beverly Taylor Sorenson statewide expansion. And I'll just keep going, Chair, and if there's no questions or concerns, I just want to make sure that, we're covering all of them. The STEM endorsements. And again, too, we did add a column that kind of helps summarize these. We don't have summaries for all the business cases because some of them we felt speak for themselves. But the summaries should be additional or provide information to you without having to go click over and go to the business case. But again, we'll answer any questions or concerns you have.
Oh, we have hang on one sec. Board member Jenny Earl.
Yeah, will you go back to student safety, the 65 million?
Sure.
That's additional funding on top of the funding that we're already getting mental health and,
So it
right?
would
So
be-
this is an additional ask?
Right. We're requesting or, proposing to the board request one-time funding in the amount of 65 million.
For?
So for school safety for
For
buildings,
buildings?
Right, enhancements or.
So why, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Why did we not do this in the legislature last year?
Well, we tried.
I know, but that's my point, is why did they not do this? And I have
Hey,
an
Superintendent
understanding of
Dixon might want to
that.
weigh in on this
So-
particular item.
Thank you, Chair Huntsman. You might recall as this made its way through the legislature, it got caught up in the HB 120 battle versus HB 373. And so all of this was embedded in the board's priority bill of HB 120. That negotiation just kept going on till the last minute. At the end of the day, several university buildings got funded instead of the $65 million. And to be fair to policymakers that were making this decision, as we dug into it after the fact, I think they were hearing from some entities that a lot of these things had been taken care of, or you had legislators who had been into a school and they had seen a new school with these things built in. Our point was that there are LEAs out there who can't raise revenue. I mean, you go into certain buildings, for the sake of safety, I won't name them, but I've been in some where they don't have the revenue to change their vestibule. It would also pay for technology. There's a lot of great technology out there as well that can provide a sense of safety and real safety as well in checking people in and out of schools and being able to know where kids are. And so those were the things that the board wanted to pay for, and at the end of the day, it got shifted to higher education.
Okay, so, okay.
And it was also, there was some talk about if they had another session, so it totally wasn't tabled, it just didn't get through, and there's still LEAs in that, and I think Terry could talk about their group,
So-
they're still seeking.
Is there a way from districts themselves to say, we have this need, and maybe this has already been done, so that we're not, I guess I'm looking at
Yeah.
65 million and I'm not
Super.
seeing, and we have a lot of districts that either have built new, and you're right, not everybody has though, and so there probably is that need in some way, whether it's through a grant program or what,
Superintendent Dixon.
so.
That's a great question, important
Yeah.
question. The $65 million came from actually Mr. Shoemaker and others coming together to survey districts, and we had charter input as well to say what are the needs out there. And so this was an estimate. It could be more, it could be less, but this was an estimate based on the input that we had. For a lot of our rural, especially LEAs, where again, they don't have the ability to tax like maybe some of the urban areas do with property tax. They've got some really old buildings that you have to do some major remodeling. I know that Board Member Marsh can tell you about one of his schools that I think we actually looked at North Summit High, is that correct? And the money that was put into that was a good estimate of what did it take to make some physical changes with entries outside, some of the vestibule changes, some technology in the school, and it was a significant amount. I think it was, you would know better than anyone else. But those are the kind of estimates that we looked at. Kanab High just refurbished their entryway, and I think that their initial estimate was $50,000, and if I'm remembering correctly, it went up to about $75,000 to $80,000 by the time that was done, and that was just their vestibule. So those were all the things that we took into consideration when putting that $65 million on the table. And Mr. Shoemaker would be able to tell you if anything's changed, but I think we were using those same numbers since it didn't get funded.
Okay, I just would like, I guess I want a more real look at things and not just we're going to do 65, whatever you guys need or want kind of a thing, because a lot of places are taking care of that already, but not everyone, and we do want kids safe, so I'm not questioning that, I'm just saying, anyways.
Scott?
So Superintendent Shoemaker was clear with me that we're developing just along the lines of Board Member Earl's point or, request. There's still some work that can go into the business case, and we'll have it ready for October, subject to any concerns that he might have. But that's the intent, is to make sure that we get the kind of integrity or fidelity, if we will, with your
Let me invite
concerns as
Terry
well.
up on this, okay? Mr. Shoemaker, if you'd be so kind.
Thank you. Terry Shoemaker with Utah School Boards Association, Utah School Superintendents Association. This business case is being developed still. I think Board Member Earl is correct, is not all the data's there. And, but we wanted to get it in here in front of you anyway. And with the help of the School Safety Committee and others that are working on this here at the State Board, as well as the work that we're doing with the Superintendents of School Boards Association, we want to make it very clear to you, board members, that this issue is not going away. There are clear needs that are out there that simply have not been addressed at all. The local boards of education are doing the best they can with it. There have been many needs that have been met with the local funds that they have already, but there are many, 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 many others that have not been met. And so I'm trying to invite the legislature, and the School Boards Association, the superintendents are trying to invite the legislature to participate with us, to help move this along faster than we can do presently with the funding that we have in our own school districts. So that's where we're at right now. I hope that answers that question.
And Terry, isn't the ask still on one time, which
It is one-time
we tried to
money.
do last round, and what
It is
happened this time?
one-time money,
And
yes.
a good investment with one time.
Yes. It's a great investment for one time, and frankly, public education has not been receiving one-time funds hardly at all over the last several years, and it's, in my mind, this is a really good use for one-time funds when they're available, and they will be available again.
Okay, thank you. All right, Scott, please
Okay.
continue.
I think we left off around the STEM endorsements, foreign exchange students, dual language immersion. The
Go a
Utah,
little-
go ahead.
Yeah, just
You
have
start.
a little pause on each one in case somebody,
Sure,
okay?
okay.
I knew there was a question out there, I could sense it. Board Member Lear.
The one on foreign exchange students, Scott, it's something, I mean, this is just more Utah money for foreign exchange students, many of whom, to waive their tuition, the cost of educating them. Is this something prompting this other than the companies that benefit from this? Or is,
Okay. All right.
Member Lear, great question. LEA's requested, so 328 students are allowed to come every year. In 19, there were 19 more requests than they could fund. This year, there were 49 more requests. So this is trying to meet the capacity and get it closer to the need or the demand from LEAs.
Okay, Board Member Lear.
just to be clear, though, those requests come from companies who bring these students here. Isn't that right? They may come through LEAs, but isn't that who wants the funding waived so that the companies make more and the schools make less?
So this is to offset the cost of educating those students, and it comes from the LEAs. More specifics may come from Jennifer.
Yeah, so this money is for the WPU, for those students to be able to be served at that school. Otherwise, it's a cost to the school to have those students. And so to create that environment to allow other students in their systems to have that experience of meeting students from foreign countries, and for those students to have the benefit of experiencing a Utah education system, the money is actually directly for the schools to pay for the WPU type experience for students.
And I'm sorry to belabor this, if I can, but for us Utah waiving the tuition, the money would be paid by either a business that recruits these students or subsidized by that, or it would be paid by the family themselves who wants their child to have this experience. Is that not true?
I'm going to play ignorance and call up Carl, because Carl Bowman will know.
Maybe I didn't want to.
Carl
Sorry.
can give you accurate information.
Chair, so
kind of
this is
annoys me.
important. This is what we need to make sure of, is that, in order for you to make an informed decision, we needed to wrench out all these details, right? So that's why we set aside this time. I know Angie's back there going, well, hey, I got some time here too.
I
We're gonna
promised her
run
at
too,
least
but,
a half hour,
you know,
Scott. So
yeah,
Sorry,
you're
all
going
right.
to do a
Last
wrap up
question.
at 20
Right.
till.
Okay.
Carl Bowman, Teaching and Learning. So the foreign exchange students under the J1 visa process in the legislation actually benefit the schools by providing those opportunities for students to interact. I think Board Member Lear is talking about the F1 visa students who pay full tuition. And I think that's the difference between the legislation of F1 and J1 students.
I'll talk to you later, because I think I'm not explaining myself very well, so thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, next up is U-Star. We covered the teacher salary supplement program as an example earlier. Then you have ICE, Underage Drinking Prevention Program, the K-12 Computer Science Initiative Grants, Professional Outreach Program, or POPS, the University of Utah Reading Clinic, Beverly Taylor Sorenson's Arts Learning Program Maintenance. Okay, so there's two BT Beverly Taylor Sorenson requests. There's one up further was 16 million, but then this is a maintenance piece. Then, as I
Okay, hang on a
articulated
sec.
earlier, okay.
Board Member Linda Hansen?
Scott, do we know how much Beverly Taylor Sorenson already has ongoing?
We can get that off us, yeah, go ahead.
I just wondered, I know it's quite a amount. I mean, it's a great program, but.
It's close to 12 million.
Yeah.
It's 11.8 something, if I remember right.
They have
11,880, I think, is
Yeah.
actually.
1 million is
1 million is one.
1 million is one time, 11,880 though, so.
11,880, and so this would add like almost double, or more than double what they've got.
So the proposal for the 16 million is to go statewide. So currently, we are only in a small set of schools to be able to provide that service. So from an equity lens, if you're lucky enough to be a BTS school, you're receiving those funds.
I thought they were already statewide, because
The
a couple of
program
years
is-
ago, they told me that, I only had one district, one teeny tiny district, you guys can tell which one that is, that wasn't involved in it, and everybody else had services from them, so I'm a
in
little
terms of LEAs,
confused.
it's available statewide. In terms of in the schools, it's not. So I'm going to actually, Kathy can give you a great description of, for example, in Davis, what it looks like, or another school district. It's not that not every LEA can participate, it's that we don't have enough funds to put in every school. So some schools and some LEAs get access to the program, where other schools in that LEA
And the
do not.
LEA just decides which schools are getting access, is that how it works, Kathy? It's a great program, I don't doubt that. I'm just wondering, because every year, the amount goes up and up and
Well,
up,
they-
and so I'm
Yes,
wondering,
we felt that it was important for the board to recognize what the big amount would be to serve every student in the grades K-6 equitably with the Beverly Taylor Sorenson Arts Learning Program. An example is in Alpine School District, we have 27 of their 60 schools. In Davis School, but we have 2 coaches in the Alpine School District who help with some professional development. So those other schools are getting something, but they're not getting the full benefit of a specialist in the school. In the Davis School District, we have 3 coaches who cover the entire 60-some schools. So there's lots of room for growth in the Davis School District. Your question about specific districts, we have 6 districts who are not served at all, and those are Daggett, Rich, Morgan, Emory, Tintic, and San Juan. So.
And they are not served because they can't figure out how, because when I talked to Larry Shumway, that's what he said about Tintic, that they hadn't been able to figure out a way to get services in there. Well, they're not that far off the beaten path. So I'm not sure exactly why some of these areas, because certainly San Juan, some of these areas could really benefit.
Right. So in the past, the schools have been selected by application. They have made application through their LEA, and that the LEA has endorsed the application. we have then selected the schools. For the past few years, we have not been able to add any schools because there wasn't a mechanism for growth and maintenance. And so our ask or our legislative increase was just barely enough to cover the increased costs of salaries and benefits for the specialists. So we have not added new schools for the past few years. We have 38 schools right now that are on a so-called waiting list to get a specialist. And we believe that we could meet the requested needs with $5 million. It would take $16 million for us to go to the whole district. Specifically, Tintic, we've been in contact with the superintendent at Tintic School District. We've had face-to-face meetings with him. He would love to have the program in his small district, and he is working on a plan that would be feasible for him. So some of our smaller rural districts maybe can't use a full 0.5. Maybe they have a visiting artist come. So we're flexible with the LEAs in what they might propose and how they might use funding in a creative way that would still meet the minimum guidelines. Did I answer your question?
Just one short follow-up, I promise, it's
Okay,
just really
there's more
short.
in the prompt for
So
this, probably the
does-
same topic, so.
Does the Beverly Taylor Sorenson Foundation match any of this money?
The LEAs are required to match 20% of the costs.
But the
The-
Sorensons don't
The
anymore?
Artworks for Kids has contributed $300,000 for the past several years. And if you remember, I believe it was 3 years ago, they were $800,000 because we came up short and they filled in the gap. So we do have great private partners out there, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Board Member Belknap?
Are you doing Beverly Taylor? You want to skip me because I'm going.
I skipped you already,
Thank you.
so here we go. Vice Chair Brittany Cummins.
Can you speak to maybe if there's an evaluation process that's part of this? How do, we all love the artwork that's here every month, and it's fantastic. Has there ever been an evaluation of the program, the effects that it has on students, whether academic or, culture, et cetera, in the school, as well as possible innovative ways to change how the program is spread throughout this state so that we could reach more students without always having to ask for more money?
For the first several years of the program, there was a legislative mandate for an outside evaluation of effectiveness of the program, and that was done by the Utah Education Policy Center. And the results of those studies indicated that several great results, increased learning in other content areas, specifically math and English language arts. Other benefits were increased student engagement, improved behavior, increased parental involvement in school, improved school climate. Those were the empirical studies that were done by the UAPC. Since then, we have done some other studies that include the Y2 organization did a study that showed that teachers in BTS ALP schools are happier in the jobs. I think that's a significant. So yes, there have been studies. For the past 2 years, we have required principals to self-evaluate and report on their implementation. And the implementation guidelines are research-based for the best bang for the buck in the program. And it's intended, that assurances is intended as instructive as well as corrective, so that principals can say, oh, we could be better if we, and then we hope to provide the support for them to do so. And I've lost your second question, sorry.
Can I follow up on the
You
first
bet.
one really quick? So you said that there was some results in math and science, I believe you said.
Math and English
Math and
language arts.
English. How was that measured? Was it
The-
just test scores?
Test scores.
Okay.
So UEPC had access to our data bank of test scores, and they compared BTS-ALP schools at that time to like-situated sister schools without the program, and showed that the school had that the program had a positive impact.
Okay. My second question then was, has this program ever kind of done an inside look at itself and said, can we be more efficiently get this program out to more schools without increasing the money ask?
Yes, we did. In fact, as the program started, it was one specialist to one school. And it was a side-by-side model where the classroom teacher and the art specialist were in the class at the same time. And we found that that is by far the most effective and gets the best results. It's also very expensive to have two teachers in the classroom at the same time and one specialist for each school, regardless of the school size. So years ago, we met with leadership in this agency and talked about, wow, what if we gave everybody something? And we did a gear up where we went from 1-to-1 to 1-to-2, 1-to-3, 1-to-4, and 1-to-5. And we started down that path, and we got to 1-to-3. And at 1-to-3, there was so much pushback about the program is now so diluted that it is not having the impact that makes it worth it. So at that time, with support of leadership here, we went back to the 1-to-2. We changed the side-by-side to be a collaborative model so that there is collaboration in order to do this great integration without having to have the two teachers. So we feel that we have tried to be as efficient and yet maintain fidelity to students having a real learning experience in and through the arts, not just an exposure.
Okay. A question I have, maybe Scott, you can answer it. And Beverly Taylor Sorenson, they are really good at, when this comes up, they're at the table with the legislature. In fact, they come here. They'll probably want to try to come here because we're talking about them right now, and there they are in the back on all of this. So the question I have is, Scott, is the last couple of years, we have asked for additional funding.
We have.
And we did get additional funding, if I recall. And with that funding, there was, my understanding, there was two pieces, and Kathy, I don't want to contradict you or anything, but it seems like they wanted to push this out. This is what happened up on the Hill when the Beverly Sorenson people were talking about. They wanted to get more of what they do onto the schools, and then they also need to pay for some inflation kind of things to keep their people on board. So there was two pieces. So my understanding and my recall for the last couple of years, we have been, as we have put it in our ask, part of it was to get it more of this expanded into more schools, because the question's already asked, is it in every school? No. And the answer is not quite yet. Am I out of bounds on that topic?
No, I don't think you're out of bounds. I mean, that was the intent, was to, which I think is the same this year, is to get more money into the schools, right? So, yeah. What?
So we did, is it okay?
Yeah.
We did receive $1 million increase this year, which was one-time funding, so that funding could potentially go away. And that $1 million was only enough to maintain the increase in teacher salaries. In fact, with the salaries that have been increased in large ways over the summer, I may be short. But this is the first year that we have put forward a formal request for an automatic growth and maintenance piece.
Right.
So that has not been in the past. This is the first year that's
For
been.
growth?
Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
well, for maintenance. I'm sorry,
Oh.
I'm using the wrong term.
Oh, for maintenance,
Right.
all right. Okay, I just.
Because there's
like-
two requests. There's one for more money basically in the classrooms, right, which is the $16 million request. And then there's this request that we got to, at this point, was $2 million, which is the maintenance request this year. So last year, to her point, we got the $1 million, but, and, you know, this is why we're coming forward with another business case, is for the maintenance piece of it to sustain that. With one-time money, to her point, it could go away, so we're trying to make sure that we address
Okay.
that situation by way of this process.
Okay, and I'm forgetting her name with Beverly Sorenson back here.
Lisa Clough.
Can we invite you up? And do you want to add any clarity, or if we misspoke, or staff?
It just, for the maintenance for the 2 million, it's really so that we don't have to come every year
Yeah.
and advocate for money. It is to
Right.
just say, here's what we need to maintain the program, so that you don't have to see this every year. That is what the 2 million one is for. 16 million, or if you decide to scale that, is to expand the program. So you can kind of see those as two different pieces.
Okay. Sorry, I
Lisa
forgot
Clough,
your name.
Artworks for Kids. It's nice to be here. The only thing that I would add, I mean, Kathy described everything so well, is that we are currently in the process of developing a 5-year strategic plan, which will also look at the inner workings of the program. And so we're continually doing things to make sure the program is working well and it is successful.
Okay, thank you.
And that is something that Artworks for Kids is footing the bill for. So the Beverly Taylor Sorenson Foundation and Artworks for Kids continues in so many ways to help fund this program. And remember that there are 7 university endowments that help with the professional development.
Thank you. There's some other questions here. Board Member Mike Haynes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Lisa, Kathy, for all your work in this program. It's a great program. I think a lot of kids have benefited from it. My question comes from experience offering great programs to schools, principals, districts, and thinking that they're the best thing in the world, but then the principals don't think the same. So can you help me understand the demand across the state to have access to this program? What has been done to ensure that we know that this is a program that's going to be successful because our principals and LEAs are asking for it?
As Kathy mentioned, it's been an application process in the past, so principals do help apply for the program through their LEA. Part of the professional development is to principals, and we work with the Principals Association, the superintendents, so we really do get out and work with the different organizations to ensure that it is a program that they see as benefiting their school. To your note, Beverly would always say to us, without the principal, you don't have the program, a good
Right.
program in your school.
Right, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Laura, did you want to weigh on this?
No,
Okay.
we need to move on.
All right, you're in the queue. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions or comments, so thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so there was the University of Utah Reading Clinic before that, then category B is.
Hold on, hang on.
Okay.
Okay, now we jumped off of it. Now, Board Member Belknap.
Okay, thank you. That's one of the things I want to talk about is the University Reading Clinic. It was interesting when we met with Senator Hilliard, his comment was, why do you keep giving money to one university in one area that's not very equitable? And so I'm going to have a really hard time, not that I don't think that helping these kids through the university is not a good idea, but why are we picking one area, one group of kids to serve us. And then I'm just going to say this while I have the mic, Chair. Student transportation, I know it's like 3 down from here, but on the student transportation piece, have we ever considered not taking this out of our education funds and going to and fight in the transportation world and see if we can't get some of this funding to come from the transportation funding in the general fund?
So I can't answer the question on the history of it, whether we did, but I can develop that. Sure, yeah, I can look at that, so. Okay. Say what?
Do you want to speak to the reading one?
Sure.
On the reading, university?
Yeah.
Oh,
You have that?
It's
Okay.
not a request from our office in terms of like teaching and learning, but there is only one other university in the state that does provide that opportunity, and that's Utah State University. So those two could be potentials, and it is scholarships for students. So are there children in northern Utah that could benefit? Absolutely. Yeah, and it's having the services available. Southern Utah doesn't have the services available yet, but yes, absolutely.
Scott?
Yes.
We are out of time.
Okay, so what's important then to close is we didn't get to Category C. Category D will be covered by the Superintendent Coleman during his portion. What staff respectfully requests coming away from this is just a summary of what the board needs from us, like further analysis or development. I haven't really heard any action items that say, I just want to verify that though, because the board meeting in October is the final opportunity, if you will, for you to basically mandate or put, what we put forward as far as requests for new money or additional money by way of these business cases in accordance with the Budgetary Procedures Act. We don't necessarily have to land on a particular recommendation on the WPU this meeting. We've done that in the past because, again, it kind of helps, tailor the request around, what we would at least estimate revenue to be. I just ask that, the board either consider doing that now or, defer, wait until October when you do it all at once. And, maybe we need to set aside 6 hours for that, so no. I mean, because it's important. It's really important that we go through all of these and make sure to do that. So we want to give you as much time as possible because we want you to be as informed as possible and recognize all of the work, which I'm sure you do, that's gone in with the cross-collaboration, not only internally here, but externally as well. So.
Okay. Superintendent Dixon?
We didn't get to Category C, as Scott mentioned, and these are needs that we have internally, so we would encourage you, if you have questions about them, to either call us or even maybe put them in writing, and we would respond to the entire board so everybody could see the answer, just cautioning not to get into a debate or anything that would constitute any kind of board action. But certainly, that might be a way to address some of these that maybe people don't know they have the question until they see the question and answer. So please email us between now and October with either questions from Category C, Category B, anything that you've heard today or have questions about. Please call or email, especially while it's fresh on your minds. That would be great. Thanks.
Yeah, and if I may expand on that further, if you'll email your questions to me, and I'll take them. That way we can keep it centralized, right? So the questions come in, and then we'll get the staff to answer them, and then we'll track and make sure that every question is addressed. There is contact information on the business cases for staff. However, if you just go to the individual staff member and all that, the risk is that we won't keep a consolidated tracker with it and all that. So that's why we do this drill, is we make sure that everything's again, interactive and processed. So if you'll send your questions to me, I'll make sure that they get addressed, and then we can bring them to you in October. So.
Board Member Jenny Earl.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about the necessary existence small school funding and why it's only $500,000. Is this just something we don't need? I know you're laughing, and I'm from a school that takes it. Well, I heard kind of some giggles, but I know, but at the same time, I'm wondering why it's such a small ask, or do other programs fill in the blanks? So this isn't. What's that?
Show the exact amount.
I know.
We'll make sure the amounts get on there. Let us come. I know we're out of time.
Sure.
So that's a question
that's in
that
general.
I'll take,
Yep.
and I'll get with
Okay.
Superintendent Shoemaker, and we'll answer that question in October.
I guess because we have such big asks in other areas,
Sure.
but this would seem like this is an everyday need for some of these districts on what they do every day, not an extension of the regular school day or what we commonly, anyways, I just am wondering why we've asked so little. So, okay.
We'll answer that question.
Yes. Board Member Cindy Davis?
Just to dovetail on that question, why, can you help us when we come back the next time to understand why we're putting, we've got the WPU and we've got the NES money, but then we've also got the ask for the regional service centers, which are also supporting. I mean, where are these things crossing? And do the regional service support centers cross over whatever the NES funds were supposed to do? And maybe that's something we can address next time.
I'll answer that question next time, and just because of time, I would today, but.
So the way
we'll
that
put
I'm getting
on
the
list.
question is, on Cindy's is if I'm getting this right, is the why, there's all these different mechanisms that supplement rural. That's your question, correct? All right.
Yeah,
Well,
I'll address it.
there's probably more than three things that
Yeah.
that affect.
Yeah, this is exactly what we need.
Yep.
We'll come back with answers to that. I
Yes.
just don't want to get into it right now because we're out of time.
Okay.
so. But we'll address it.
So I think the WPU and all of that, we've had good discussion. It's kind of a placeholder where it's at
Sure.
on that number, and then we will, through leadership and that, and work with you, assess how much time we're going to need.
Mhm.
I'm not saying an extra board meeting, but I'm not sure, but we've got to get it right.
Right.
Or kind of be united and
Sure.
start this process after our October meeting.
It's a great process. It's interactive. It's inclusive. It's resulted in some positive outcomes in the past years. We understand, what's coming up in the legislative session, as far as tax reform goes, along those lines. But the legislature has been just awesome as far as the partnership that we've had and the success that we've had with, again, getting resources to where it counts.
The idea is we go in prepared.
Sure.
And the only way we get prepared is to do this due diligence, so thank you.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Scott, and your group. Angie, are you ready to come up?
Good
Okay,
morning, board
we have
members.
till like quarter after,
Okay.
maybe 20 after, then we'll have a quick break, and then we go into our USDB, so.
Wonderful. Thank you. Angie Stallings, your Deputy Superintendent of Policy, and Jeff Van Holten, your Policy Advisor, and we're happy to be here with you today. And just as a reminder, we went through a number of these last month in your board meeting, and if we want to follow the same protocol we did last month, Jeff and I will go through the whole list. There's 14 additional items for you this month. We covered 14 last month. And then, of course, takes questions as we go, but I think the idea was, Chair, that then the board would either take a motion to say that you all approve us reaching out to legislators to work on these bill files, or ask us to remove or not go forward with some of them. So as a little brief update since last month and the 14 items that you approved, I wanted to let you know that this month in the Education Interim Committee, 5 out of those 14 will be discussed at the Ed Interim Committee, with the potential that the committee will open 2 committee bill files. 3 of the items are fairly technical and what I would call easy bills that we are hoping might potentially be included in an Education Interim Committee bill as kind of a technical amendments. And then there is going to be a small presentation about school breakfast related to the numbers 5 and 6 of the requests that you approved last month. So something just to look forward to, that the Education Interim Committee will be discussing some of your policy requests in the September meeting. So now we'll go through the 14 new requests we have this month. And we'll start with number 1, which is related to a bill from the 2018 session, which was SB 198, Public School Discipline Action Amendments. At the time, in 2017, fortunately or unfortunately, we did not have the same relationship with our law enforcement agencies that we do now. So that's the unfortunate part of then. But the fortunate part now is that we do have these relationships. What we found is due to some of our student data privacy laws, as well as the law enforcement FERPA type laws that they have about data sharing, we need some statutory changes to be made in order to have the data sharing of law enforcement giving data to our school districts and charter schools in order to give that data to us for this report. So we would like to work with Senator Anderegg, who was the sponsor of the 2018 legislation, to look at this in a little bit more holistic way and see if we can get some more collaboration between law enforcement LEAs, of which there's about 300, and of course our school LEAs, which are about 150-ish, to be able to bring this data together. So that would be the first concept.
Great. On to the second one. If any of you attended the June Ed Interim Committee, you saw this presentation with Sarah Wibke and Shannon from our office. They presented on early literacy and expanding that into an early learning program, including early numeracy. So we are now taking the next steps. It was received very well with the Ed Interim Committee, and we're now moving forward and seeking requests from you to expand that into an early learning program. We would rebrand it instead of early literacy, and then also include early numeracy with the early literacy program. So that's the second one. We'll move quickly on to the third one. The third one is related to the situation with Questar and some of the problems that we incurred with following the procurement code as it's currently written and where that got us. And so we now have a good list from our procurement office on some of the issues that are currently in existence with the code that if they were different or had been removed, we would have maybe been able to do more research and go through a better process to make sure we could have avoided something like the Questar situation. So we also presented this idea in the Questar presentation, both in Public Ed Approps and Ed Interim, and received some good feedback from several representatives that would like to open a bill file to correct some of these issues so that we can have a better procurement process.
Does anybody
Real
have
quick
any
before
questions?
so you're wanting to get through the 14 because my lights are coming up. I thought that was your instructions.
Well,
You wanted
we'd
to
be
get-
happy to take questions.
Okay, let's take them along the way because
be great.
they've got questions. I don't want them to forget
That'd be
them.
great.
So we might not get to 14.
Okay.
So, Board Member Lear.
My question is similar to the one I asked before, the early learning quality instruction legislative request. Does any money go along with that? And yes, so it just would help me again. I just feel like this is, and maybe it's just me understanding your construct, but I would appreciate a more holistic, and it's not really, and I don't really need an answer right this second. Sorry, Jennifer.
You're asking the question right now, so you're going to get an answer.
Well, I didn't, it's
Unless
not
you
really
want
a
to wait
question.
and ask
I'm
your
just
question
saying,
later.
this is an example of one more piece of the early childhood and the learning thing. And if I could look at them all together, then I could see the priorities that you folks are recommending and how they all fit together. So thanks. That's all.
Okay, Board Member Cindy Davis.
I just wanted to kind of reiterate a conversation that I had with Representative Moss about when we work on number 3, that we also include exploring having a person who is not part of the blind procurement process to vet and monitor for red flags that can come back and say Company B has defaulted on this contract in another state.
Okay.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Please continue now.
Okay, number 4, this is in relation to the U-Star program, which we're hoping through this request that we will rebrand it and call it the MOST program. So it will be the Math Science Opportunity for Students and Teachers program to kind of better describe in the title what the program actually does. U-Star itself does not really give a good picture of what the program is designed to accomplish. With that said, we would be seeking a way to broaden some of the appropriation given. There's delineations within the statute that talk about the money that is given can be used for X, Y, and Z. We would like to add a few things to that list to create some flexibility and allow LEAs essentially to collaborate across district lines, which will really help a lot of our rural LEAs as well utilize these funds more effectively toward the purpose that they were designed for. So it would be essentially broadening that list for a certain piece of the appropriation and then rebranding the name of the program.
Okay. Question or comment, Board Member Linda Hansen.
I really like this idea. There's more than one use star, and it gets very confusing. So I think this is great. Thank you.
Okay. Please continue.
Okay. Number 5, it would be to add an allowance in the Intergenerational Poverty Interventions Grant Program for a small percentage of the grant funding to be used for administration. So previously we had that set aside in board rule, and really that needs to be done at the legislative level because it's the legislature who determines how we can use that revenue. And so it would be similar to what we did a couple of years ago with our early literacy program, which used to be called the K-3 reading program. We added a provision that allows the state board may use up to 3% of the funds, for example, appropriated for this program for administrative purposes, and that would be to help support the staff person who runs the program, as well as for program evaluation. Okay.
On number 6, we are looking at the Partnerships for Student Success program, and on this one, the statute currently requires that there be an independent evaluator to evaluate the program. One of the issues is we would like to do an impact evaluation to truly measure the full impact of the program, and that is extremely expensive and outstrips what is currently appropriated. Staff feels that we actually would be far more efficient and capable of doing this internally rather than contracting with an external party to do the evaluation. So the request would be to remove the external evaluator requirement and make that an internal evaluation, as well as to increase some of the funding for administrative costs so that we can handle that internally, which over the long run would be a cost savings in terms of having to go out and try and do an impact evaluation annually.
Okay, should I keep moving along?
Keep going.
Okay, great. Number 7, this is related to a discussion you just barely had about the Beverly Taylor Sorenson program. This is the policy companion to what would be a future automatic increaser. You remember that Kathy and Jennifer mentioned the $2 million just for the maintenance of the program. What they would like is some language that is similar to language that we currently have in statute around the concurrent enrollment program. And I was going to pull it up, but Jeff ended up beating me to the punch on projecting. But in the current concurrent enrollment program, it talks about subject to budget constraints, the legislature shall annually increase the money appropriated for concurrent enrollment in proportion to the percentage increase over the previous year, essentially in the K-12 increase in enrollment. So what it would be is similar language saying that the Beverly Taylor Sorenson program also would automatically increase to maintain the program. That would be in statute. So again, we wouldn't have to come back every year to the legislature and say, by the way, we've got more students. Can we please increase the program? Okay, and now the next program is very similar in that I just mentioned that the concurrent enrollment program has that automatic increaser. Instead of it being increased based on the student population growth, we would like it to be based on the student participation in concurrent enrollment, because what we're seeing, this is great news, that as, let's say, our student population is growing 1% or 2% per year, the enrollment in concurrent enrollment is outpacing that to say 3 to 5. Now, I am just throwing out numbers for examples, so please don't quote me on that. But the good news is we have more students who are interested in concurrent enrollment, as well as our Enhancement for Accelerated Students program. So that's your AP, IB, gifted and talented. We'd like the automatic increaser to be tied to student enrollment in the program versus overall state population. So that is what number 8 is.
Vice Chair Braden, comments?
So are we looking for, based on this year's, we would grow it? Because obviously, there'd have to be a lag of estimating growth. Is that how that would work?
Right, it would be probably an estimation, just like we estimate what the growth and enrollment's going to be. You're right, we'd have to probably look at maybe the last year or two, and I'm not exactly sure what that would look like, but we'd look at trend data on enrollment increases, say, over the previous 1 or 2 years. You maybe have the data.
If allowed. All right. Jennifer Thronson, Director of Teaching and Learning. To answer that question, for concurrent enrollment, for example, we've had a 33% growth increase in the WPU, and the enrollment is not keeping up with that kind of increase. So what we would base it on is the October 1 count of who's enrolled in the concurrent enrollment type course, and that would help us to keep up pace. It would be a year behind, but a lot of our programs are kind of built that way. It would still continue to grow with us.
So I vastly underestimated the increase.
It's very large.
Okay. Board Member Davis.
I just want to say thank you. We've had several conversations about this, and I have with Nate as well. Kind of working on this, and I just want, as board members, for us to think we do put a lot of extra resources into our striving learners, and when we're personalizing education, we also have needs on our advanced learners, and so when we're personalizing, we really have some needs on both ends of those spectrums. So just to keep that in mind.
Okay, go ahead,
Okay.
Jeff.
Number 9, we'd be looking at the the reading software, sorry, and changing some requirements around the 4% appropriation that goes toward administrative cost. Right now, that delineates that the analytical software as well as the evaluation come out of that, and we would be taking the analytical software piece out of the 4% because that can be its own ask, and the reason is that software is being used to analyze not just this program, but several others across, you're probably familiar with the Learn platform. So we would be getting that money from a separate ask, but what we would like to do is insert administrative cost into the 4% so that we can continue to do, run the program as it expands out further. So we would just be kind of swapping what the 4% is used for.
Go ahead to 10.
Oh, number 10 is mine as well, sorry. Number 10, you actually just heard from Carl Bowman. This is the statutory companion to his fiscal ask. This would be hopefully a very simple bill where we would strike out 328 and replace it with 368. So you'd get those 40 additional foreign exchange students.
Okay. Board Member Lear.
Wouldn't it be more direct, instead of asking for it in WPUs, to ask for it in money?
To get an appropriation instead of put
Yeah.
in the WPU?
And yes, why the choice there?
I think it's just,
I actually have no idea.
I'm guessing it's just the way the statute has it currently. I can pull it up really quickly.
And it is currently that way.
Yeah.
I feel like it would be more informative if it were in money, if it were in dollars instead of in WPUs. Just a thought. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay, please continue.
Great. So now we're on number 11, which this is related, actually, number 11 and 14. I wish they were closer together because they're both related to conversations that are going on the Hill right now around or revolving around vaping, cessation of vaping efforts, or prevention, postvention of something that's going on with vaping. So many of you may remember that I believe it was 2017, it could have been 2018, there was a large alcohol amendments bill that provided a $1.5 million-ish appropriation for alcohol prevention or substance abuse prevention efforts. And that included some curriculum and training for teachers to provide this substance abuse prevention in either grades 9 or 10 or grades 7, 8. An additional now effort to support substance abuse prevention, including vaping, would be now to add an elementary component. So Botvan Life Skills is the contracted vendor that we use for the 9, 10, and 7, 8. They also have an elementary component that then introduces the substance abuse prevention, again, including vaping prevention and cessation into, and it would be offered in either grades 4 or 5. And that money, so the statute change is very simple. It's number 11. All we would do is be adding a required component in 4 and 5. This is something that a group of legislators have been discussing. There's going to be approximately 4 bills, I've been told, one about the commercial licensing around shops that sell vaping products, the criminal penalties regarding, so they're kind of changing or updating the language to not just be about tobacco, but about devices capable of anyway, there's criminal penalties, which we wouldn't be involved in, but I wanted you to be aware of kind of the landscape. This would be included in a school-based bill, and Representative Pulsifer told me to let you know that she's already planning on working on a bill to do this, as well as number 14, and she plans to present these concepts to the interim committee in September, and is anticipating that the interim committee may adopt or ask for a committee bill. Because again, there have been a group of legislators kind of looking at the impacts of vaping, and I believe the Department of Health will be doing a marketing campaign. So you'll hear that conversation at the interim committee in September, but that is number 11. And while I'm talking about it, number 14, it would provide, and we don't know what the title of these specialists would be. At one point, we thought maybe prevention specialists, inclusion specialists. It likely won't be either of those titles. But the idea is to have somebody at each school who would qualify and receive approximately a $3,000 stipend to be that point of contact at the school to support the substance abuse prevention, as well as kind of anti-bullying, as well as kind of this support system for students to feel included in school, to feel, often we've heard Representative Pulsifer has been very much involved in Jordan School District. They have something called the Golden Gate Club, where students, it's about supporting, making students feel good and part of a community. And so, more details to come about this, but the idea, and she was asked by leadership to come up with a fiscal ask to have more supports in schools to prevent things like vaping or other substance abuse, and instead lift the morale and the inclusivity of the school. I hope that helps.
We've got a couple questions, but back on 11, the funding for all that, if that's increased, then of course, what is that tied to? Is it public?
Thank you. So the 11 would be a portion of the tax on alcohol sales, and 14 would be funded out of the tax on tobacco and vaping product sales. So the idea is that as people are consuming those products, that a portion of the sales would go to preventing the use of them in the early years.
So as the adults are doing it, we're trying to help with
them not become adults later on in life.
And so with that funding and that, is this a big enough ask?
That's a good question.
Or are we going in soft?
Well, so this last one came up actually 2 days ago from a meeting we had with Representative Pulsifer, and I think you had the exact reaction that somebody else had to her when originally we thought the stipends were going to be $300 instead of $3,000, and that was the response from apparently legislative leadership that is too small. We need to really infuse efforts and get these programs and people who are willing to take on this role. We kind of likened it. We talked about some different coaches and clubs. They usually get sometimes around $3,000 to $5,000 to support a different club, and this would be a more similar type stipend. Okay. So the business case will be coming, Board Member Hansen, and because this in some ways hasn't been a staff initiated. It's kind of like the legislature has been talking about this and is initiating it, and now we've become partners. So I wanted to bring this to your attention. But the business case, I imagine, if the interim committee says, yes, we really like this idea, I'm sure we can develop a business case for you for October around this concept, but it really just came like 2 days ago. So,
Board Member Earl?
Okay, I have a lot spinning around, so I'm trying to understand. We do this in health education already. Our standards that we just passed does this for 4th grade. So what is this? This is an outside entity coming in to do another program?
so are you talking about number 11?
I'm talking about 11, which would probably, I imagine, overlap into, because we talk about in 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade,
Yeah.
you know, substances that are addictive or what. So I'm trying to understand what are we doing here?
It's instructional materials and then training for those who do the health instruction. So outside people would not be coming into the classroom, but right now, Botvin Life Skills, and if there's anybody who would like to help.
What did you say that was again?
Botvin Life Skills.
That's right, it's on their program.
Is our current provider for the 7, 8, 9, 10 component. We anticipate that the 4, 5 would likely also be provided by Botvin. There's some procurement issues about contracting and doing an amendment. Eventually, we'd have to put that out to RFP again because it is required that the board receives this money and we contract out.
So when you say we, you're saying the state is putting the curriculum together for districts, or will be districts?
We
provide it.
That, Rhett?
Okay.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Go ahead.
There we go. Rhett Larson, School and Student Safety Specialist, and I was Substance Abuse Prevention Specialist and still helping with this. And so the Botvin Life Skills Training, hoping I understand the question correctly, the teachers are trained and they provide this curriculum to their students. With the health standards, as it does talk about substance abuse, there's the substance abuse standards, part of the health standards in those grade levels that were approved. This will give evidence-based strategies to help teach that. And it's not just substance abuse prevention, or discussions on drugs. It's, problem-solving, decision-making, personal behavior, change skills. So I hope that answers some of the questions that I've heard so far. Is there one that I've missed?
No, I guess we're asking them to do that. So what, you're providing how to do it, and we're making a law to now do it?
Yeah, I'm sorry, what's that?
We vet the curriculum.
Yeah, we vet the curriculum, and the curriculum will help, so it covers these things. I think I'm not understanding the question,
So,
apologies.
I don't know if this will help. We currently already do this in high school and middle school. The idea would be to add now this component in elementary. Is that
Okay, our standards allow that. I guess what I'm saying is we have duplication of things going on. We're asking for a law to do this, and we're already got standards to do it.
So we do have the standards, as we do have the standards in 7th or 8th and 9th or 10th in health as well. This is more than just, so we're talking about general prevention with Botvin Life Skills Training, and it has the evidence, it has the science of decreasing these problems that we're seeing in our schools. Years ago, there was a program in our elementaries that was called Prevention's Dimensions.
Yep.
That program has since been retired. And so our elementaries, including, and I hope this is okay, my wife is a 3rd grade teacher, and they're wanting support and help in helping bring down the issues that they're seeing, and seeing a curriculum that helps with the general prevention and talking about self-management skills, social skills, and skills like resistance skills is beneficial. So there is a health standards. I don't necessarily look at it as a duplication. I look at it as providing evidence-based strategies to help them teach their standards.
Okay, I'll talk to him a little bit about it more. I don't
Vice
want
Chair
to.
Brittany Cummins.
Sure, I understand.
So the money that pays for this curriculum, is it from the tax from the alcohol tax and does that money, that revenue come straight to the state agency or does that go? So that's why it's at the state level, is the money comes to the state agency, we purchase these trainings and we disseminate it to the LEAs? Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
and it's 1.7 each year.
1.7 million, is that each for the tobacco tax and for the
just
alcohol?
It's just alcohol.
That
on
just
this
the
one.
alcohol?
On this one.
Yep, for
Okay.
7th or 8th and 9th or 10th.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and Jeff does have the section of code currently projected there. So essentially, what we would be doing is adding a to C. As you can see, there's an A for 7A, a B for 910. It would be to add then a component to be provided in 4.5. This program is fully funded out of alcohol sales tax. The vaping cessation one with the stipends, that is projected to come out of the tobacco. So they're all about prevention, but from two different revenue sources.
Okay, Angie? We are out of time. I've got more board members with more questions. Board Member Gravitt and Bolter, can your questions be put in writing? Are we getting into a big debate, or is it a quick, like, yes, no?
Oh, I can ask.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. We have USDB starting in 10 minutes, and I know you guys want to get set up in a break. This has been really helpful. I kind of feel like the bad guy, the timekeeper rushing and all this, with all this great stuff.
We do need a motion.
Okay, would you guys consider a working lunch and have more talk on this? Yes? Okay, I don't think we have a scheduling problem. We're not really taking action. So, no.
Chair?
We have USDB.
Just during that lunch, what I'm hoping is just for a motion that you support staff reaching out to legislators to start working on these pieces of legislation at some point.
Okay, I think we can do it.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so we'll want to be, as soon as we adjourn from USDB, we're going to dive into this.
Okay.
Okay, you guys all good with that, board members? All right. Okay, this part of the meeting's going to end. Board members, 10 minutes, we need to start USDB.